Welcome to The Fight on Matrix Midwest with Randy Carricker and company.
Hi kids, welcome to the show. Great to have you with us on a Monday morning. Coming up, the Blues' Jordan Kyrou just isn't going to escape the trade rumor mill, is he? The World Cup starts this week, and we have lots of playoff action around the sports world in our weekend highlights. But we get things started with Quick Hits, sponsored by St. Luke's. And after sweeping the Reds over the weekend, the Cardinals have a winning record at home. They're in playoff position with 99 games left. They have a fun team to watch. They have a great organic fan experience with the Tarps Off crew. Good things are happening at the ballpark. Jordan Walker, J.J. Weatherholt, and Mason Wynn are all worth going to watch. And yet, the Cardinals are still in the middle of the pack in attendance at 17th. I get what's happened the last 2 years. It was stale. There was John Mozeliak fatigue. The team wasn't very exciting. They weren't very fun to watch or as athletic as this team is. Now, this Cardinals team isn't perfect, but it used to be at this time of year. Once school was out, you'd look up at Busch Stadium and there would be 40,000 fans in the seats. Times have changed. People have spent their money on hockey and soccer tickets and other things. And the Cardinals haven't earned people back with a World Series contender yet. But this is going to be a terrific team. There's really no really good reason for the best fans in baseball to be showing up to the tune of about 28,000 announced per game. That's less than Texas, less than Houston, less than the Angels, less than San Francisco, who all have significantly worse records than the Cardinals do. Come on, let's get back to the ballpark and celebrate this young group of players. They deserve it, and the front office has earned the benefit of the doubt so far. Yeah, I understand that there are troubles with downtown, but you know what? We had a bunch of people go downtown for a friendly soccer game this week. People always show up for St. Louis City SC. They show up for the Blues. They show up for the Battlehawks, and they aren't scared to go downtown. I think it's about time we get back to being the best baseball town in America. All right, for the third year in a row, the St. Louis Battlehawks were a game away from the UFL Championship and lost the semifinal at home. Last night at the Dome, the Louisville Kings turned in multiple big plays, outscored St. Louis, and held off the Battlehawks 29-20 after outscoring the Battlehawks 11-0 in the fourth quarter. The Kings scored on touchdown runs of 53 yards in the first quarter and 51 yards in the fourth. They also had a 54-yard pass play that set up a score. It's great to have as many teams in town as we can, but we have to be realistic about the Battlehawks. Even though they led the league in attendance again at about 22,000 a game, it's expensive to open up that dome for the city 6 times a year, 5 plus a playoff game. Yes, it's a made-for-TV league, but when your marquee franchise plays 2 of their 5 home games on Friday nights, and it's hard for fans to get to a Friday night game, going head-to-head against the Cardinals, and City is tough, and the schedule didn't work so well, the best thing the league could do for this market is start the season the week after the Super Bowl. That way the playoffs would be on May 23rd and the championship game would be on May 30th. It'd be a lot earlier. But more importantly, there's no baseball competition for the first 6 weeks of the season if you start after the Super Bowl. Those are played without the competition not only of baseball, but you get February without the competition of March Madness. You have the dog days of the NHL and NBA seasons for teams around the league. I think it'd be a lot easier for this league to draw fans and to draw eyeballs to televisions if they would start earlier. That's one of the issues of many that the league has. And one of the other issues they have, at some point, and maybe this time has passed, they had to get the St. Louis Battlehawks into a championship game. And they couldn't. It's the Battlehawks' fault. But that really did hurt, I think, the fan base this year as the attendance dropped by about 10,000 per game. All right, Lars Nootbaar is back. How about his weekend? We know that Newt has always been a StatCast darling. Folks around baseball have always loved his exit velocity and his launch angle and his walk rate and his whiff rate and his barrel percentage. All those are very cool. But he hasn't been able to turn it into production. Well, after getting just a piece of his first hit of the year, an infield hit that was 79 miles an hour off of the bat, he had a ringing 105.8 mile an hour double on Friday night to ice that game against the Reds, then hit the go-ahead game-winning homer to the tune of 109.8 miles an hour on Saturday at the ballpark. Newt has the ability to hit the ball hard. And if a healthy Nootbaar can maintain those StatCast numbers, as he has put up over the last few years, except for the ankle injury year, and he can turn those numbers into actual baseball production, he'll be a valuable player either to play for the Cardinals or for the Cardinals to trade at the deadline. And this goes back to the top of the show when we talked about the fans. Nootbaar's under contract for next season. If he's performing, do the Cardinals keep him for a playoff run? And would a playoff run enhance attendance? It's all intertwined, and it'll be interesting to see, A, how Nootbaar does this year with health, and B, how he is doing at the trade deadline and whether or not the Cardinals want to move him. I think right now the Cardinals, because of their depth of outfield, would be inclined to move Nootbaar. There are a lot of teams that could use a bat like his, and the Cardinals have people like Juan Sanchez on the way. They're going to be able to move, Josh on the way. And so they'll be in pretty good shape in terms of the outfield. But I think that the big question here is going to be, is Nootbaar going to be good enough once we reach the deadline for somebody to be interested in him? Hey, let's talk a little hockey. ESPN's Greg Wyshynski has his top summer trade targets out, and he has Dylan Larkin of the Red Wings, who had a requested trade, and the Blues' Jordan Kyrou in his top 3 available skaters. The Red Wings are really old. They have a dozen players over 30, and they haven't made the playoffs for a decade. Might it make sense for them to move Larkin to the Blues for Kyrou and a couple of the Blues' top draft picks, if not all 3 first-rounders? And that's the Red Wings side. There are 4 sides here. Larkin wants a deal, but he has a full no trade. He likely asked for a trade to be moved to a team that he knows will be a playoff team, like Colorado or Vegas or Dallas. Kyrou also has a no trade. The Wings haven't been to the playoffs in a decade. Is there anything about being a Red Wing that's better than being a Blue? And then you have Detroit. What direction do they want to go? Steve Yzerman has to be under pressure there as their general manager. Do they try to make the playoffs next year after being close this season? Or do they rebuild with draft picks? And then, if you're the Blues, do you want a soon-to-be 30-year-old who, while great, will cost a lot of assets to get on your team and hasn't led a team to the playoffs? There would be a lot to work through to get Larkin to St. Louis, but I'm telling you this, he would look great wearing that blue note. He's one of the 5 players in the league that scored 30 or more goals in each of the last 5 years. The Blues don't have an established number 2 center. Robert Thomas is clear as a 1 or a 2 if Larkin is on the team. If you have those 2 at the top of your center depth chart, you've really got something, and you might have not only a playoff team, but a team that would go deep into the playoffs. But the question is, could you work a deal with Detroit? I think it's going to be hard, A, for Detroit to move Larkin in the first place, and B, for the Blues to give them the value that they would require. The NCAA has rejected Texas Tech's reinstatement for former Cincinnati and would-be Texas Tech quarterback Brandon Sorsby. He was the number 1 player in the transfer portal this year, and Tech was giving him $6 million to play. But gambling sites and legal authorities got word of his gambling, and after that, he went into gambling addiction rehab. Texas Tech's appeal to the NCAA to have his eligibility reinstated was denied on Friday. Sorsby was ruled ineligible after he acknowledged gambling on sports, including on his own team while at Indiana. The denial of Texas Tech appeal is separate from Sorsby's lawsuit against the NCAA. If the courts side with Sorsby and he is allowed to play, that's an invitation for every player in college sports to gamble on pretty much everything they want. On a weekend that the hero of the Alabama State NCAA basketball team and 3 of his teammates on the 24-25 team were ruled permanently ineligible for accepting payment from gamblers to fix the outcome of a game that season, you've got this situation piling up. According to the NCAA, 2 known bettors offered the Alabama State players a total of $2,000 to throw the game. The players accepted and were later paid. I'm telling you, if players are allowed to gamble, you never are going to know whether or not they're throwing a game. If Sorsby is allowed by the courts to play, the kind of people that pay kids to fix games will be even more emboldened, and rightfully so. The courts work on precedent, and if the precedent is set that players are allowed to play even if they gamble, the rules against players gambling on their teams will effectively be defanged. If Sorsby is allowed to play college football this year or ever again, that's a real slippery slope for college sports, because there are going to be people coming after these players right and left saying, hey, we'll give you money, and if the players bet on their own team or bet against their own team, what's the NCAA going to do if they find out? Well, Sorsby was allowed to play. I should be allowed to play too. All right, those are your quick hits here in the fight. And Coming up, well, first of all, they're sponsored by St. Luke's, as you know. Top-notch doctors in everything from heart health to orthopedics and more. Visit stlukes-stl.com today, of course. Later in the show, I'm going to give you a daily wager, and we'll have that before today's fun fact. Stick around, and don't forget, next up, I have weekend highlights for you here in The Fight. Time now for a look at the weekend in the sports world, and what a party we had in downtown St. Louis on Saturday, didn't we? Bosnia and Panama played their friendly on Saturday at Energizer Park, and the crowd was awesome for the 1-1 draw. The Bosnian community really showed up and showed out in the streets of St. Louis, and then they filled up the stadium. Shout out to that Bosnian community, by the way, for throwing quite the party. They had a great time. Bosnia scored in the 23rd minute, and it seemed like they were the home team, basically because they were. But Panama did get the equalizer just after halftime. Both teams' next game will be in the World Cup next week. And if what we saw here in St. Louis over the weekend is any indication, cities around the country are going to have great provincial parties for the people of the countries that are playing. 48 different countries are going to be represented in the World Cup, and we should really embrace this. Having as much fun as those countries are going to have, and as much fun as the Bosnians had at their friendly on Saturday. I hope that the World Cup winds up being just a giant American party. And oh, by the way, in Chicago, the USA World Cup team fell to Germany in their final tune-up before World Cup. They play Paraguay Friday in Los Angeles, and it's my guess that this will be the highest rated World Cup in USA history. And we've had some really good ones. Someone will become a star, whether that's Christian Pulisic or Chris Richards or Jedi Robinson. The USA has a really charismatic, young, athletic soccer team, and they should be able to get out of Group D. And I think they have a chance to change soccer in America. Obviously, if they win, they do. But this is a group of players that I think young people will take to. I think they'll be watching on TV. They'll sell a lot of jerseys. And it can take soccer to that next level in the United States of America. In the Stanley Cup Finals, one of the great finals games ever over the weekend. If you didn't see it, Vegas was up 4-0 in the third, but Carolina scored 3 goals in 39 seconds of the third period to get close. It was really an amazing display on the part of Carolina, because we all thought that with what Vegas was doing here, that they had it won. Mitch Marner scoring a natural hat trick, the fastest in NHL Stanley Cup final history. But even after the second period, when he was on the intermission, he said, hey, we have a lot of work to do. And lo and behold, they did have a lot of work to do, because Carolina just would not quit. They were kind of like the 2011 Cardinals in Game 6. But they stepped up. It was not a great time for Carter Hart, and obviously Vegas was rocking and rolling here. But you watch these 3 goals in 39 seconds after Marner had tallied the hat trick, and it was a magical night. Well, and let's watch Marner one more time, because he still leads the NHL in goals during these Stanley Cup playoffs. This is a guy that was not run out of Toronto. They liked him, but they whined because he didn't perform in the playoffs. Maybe he didn't perform as well in the playoffs because he just didn't have great talent around him come playoff time. Now you've got the 3 in 39, and Carolina gets going, and they make it 4-3 after the 3 in 39. Then they wind up scoring with 1:42 to go, and the game goes into OT. But this was really epic on the part of the Hurricanes. And it was a shame that once you got to overtime, in the second overtime, Shea Theodore with a great winner in double OT, off the end board, off the back of the goalie, Brandon Bussey, and into the net for the game winner. Just a wild, weird goal, a cruncher for the Hurricanes, who have to rebound tomorrow night in Vegas to avoid a 3-1 hole. Vegas looks like, and I know we're already tired of them, and they're only in their 9th year, but they kind of look like a team of destiny. They finished with an under 500 record. During the course of the regular season, they fired their coach, Bruce Cassidy, with 8 games left, and John Tortorella takes over. Carolina was the best team in the league pretty much all season long. Carolina was the best team in the East. Colorado was the best team in the league. The Vegas Golden Knights have already eliminated the Colorado Avalanche. Now they can eliminate the top team in the East, and if they win tomorrow, this one is as good as done. The NBA Finals resume tonight. The series goes to New York, and the Knicks lead 2-0. New York has won 13 straight in these playoffs. That's the best run in a single season playoff that any team has ever had. This is going to be something tonight, because if the Knicks win, the series is over. Nobody in the NBA has ever come back from down 3-0. And as much as we love Victor Wembanyama and what he does and this young San Antonio team, they aren't going to beat the Knicks 4 in a row after the Knicks have won 13 straight. The cheapest ticket for tonight, $9,995. That's the cheapest ticket to get into Madison Square Garden. The exorbitant ticket prices for games 3 and 4 far exceed the average rent in Manhattan. That's $4,167 a month. The average ticket price again tonight, $5 below 10 grand. So for the price of a single game 3 ticket, you could buy 9 10-gram gold bars from Walmart, priced at $1,056. Here's Josh Hart of the Knicks on game 3.
Environment, atmosphere is going to be electric, obviously, and we're happy that we're at home and, we have them at our back. I kind of wish the ticket prices weren't as crazy as they are. I feel like a lot of people who are been waiting for this moment for a very long time, unfortunately aren't able to get into the building with, the cheapest ticket, $7,000-8,000. So it's just, that's ridiculous. It should still be rocking, but obviously we wish those were a little cheaper.
Okay, a couple of things. Number one, I do too. I wish they were cheaper. But the foundation of the economy is supply and demand. And there clearly is great demand among a lot of rich people in New York to get tickets. And the supply is out there because of the secondary market, because we have phones and because we have StubHub, and people can put tickets on the market at $10,000. So what we've got here is the supply or the rule of supply and demand. And then you have the fact that people have the ability to sell these tickets. 20 years ago, before we had the iPhone, people didn't have that ability. They had to put an ad in the newspaper to sell tickets. Well, now all you do is click done and you can sell your tickets for 10 grand. Now, another part that's sad tonight is that they've canceled the watch party outside Madison Square Garden. And the visuals of these watch parties have been amazing. The president is going to the game tonight. Totally understandable that for security reasons, they're going to cancel the watch party outside MSG. But that's one of the most fun things that I see with the games at Madison Square Garden is the crowd in New York going crazy, watching on the big screen outside the arena. They're going to have a couple of other watch parties, one at Central Park and another one in a different area. But for everybody to be able to celebrate right at the arena is pretty cool, and it's a bummer that they aren't going to have that tonight. And by the way, they were thinking of shutting these watch parties down anyway, and we might not see that for Game 4 either. Let's talk a little golf. At the Memorial, you had all of the big names playing. It's Jack Nicklaus tournament after all, but it wasn't a big name. It was J.T. Poston who won the biggest tournament of his career. Poston with a 7-foot birdie putt on 18 for an even par 72, and it went to a playoff. And then on the second hole of the playoff with Ryan Gerard, the winner, Poston was able to come away with a one-shot victory. It was not great, by the way, for Tommy Fleetwood and Sam Burns. They finished tied for 4th, and Rory McIlroy and Scottie Scheffler finished tied for 12th. By the way, they had to play 36 holes. A lot of players had to play 36 holes yesterday because of rain that washed out Saturday's activities. That made it tough, but Poston came through with the victory. And at the U.S. Women's Open, Nelly Korda won by a shot over Charlie Hull and Gabby Lopez at Riviera in Los Angeles. Korda was 6 shots back after the first round, 2 shots behind after 2, tied after the third round, and then took the lead and birdied 17 and parred the final hole to hang on and win her 4th major and 2nd this season. Korda is only the 2nd American in the last decade to win the Women's U.S. Open. Now, this is an interesting situation that's brewing in the LPGA because Nelly Korda is to their tour, the ladies tour, what Scottie Scheffler is to the men's tour. And she's getting her endorsement. She's getting the opportunity to play. But she is kind of the face of women's golf in America and had a great U.S. Open yesterday. And kind of like we talked about with the men's soccer team, how people can become stars, I would hope that this U.S. Open win can vault Nelly Korda to even a higher place because she's really great to watch play. She's a terrific golfer. and she's a great representative of the country and of the LPGA. So congratulations to her on getting that victory. And, oh, by the way, we should note that the Cardinals have the day off, and now they're going to play 34 games in 35 days, and they have added to their rotation. They've done a lot during the course of the last year and a half to keep their starting pitching healthy. They've limited pitch counts. They've limited innings. Well, now they've added Brandon Dobbins to the rotation, so they're going to have a six-man rotation starting tonight and then through the weekend and for the foreseeable future. And Dobbins is going to be that guy. He was sensational out of the bullpen a couple of times since coming up against the Cubs a week ago last night, and then over the weekend against the Reds. And so he'll get that opportunity. And one of those opportunities, I believe, might be Friday night when we have the Cardinals and the Twins here on Matrix Midwest. And of course, you'll be able to see that game at 7 o'clock right here on Matrix Midwest and on First Alert 4. Those are your weekend highlights here in the fight, and we hope you enjoyed them. Coming up in the list, we had a great overtime game in the Stanley Cup Finals over the weekend. We're going to bring you the biggest and best overtime games in Stanley Cup Finals history next in the fight. It's time for the list, and as we told you, Vegas and Carolina played an epic overtime game in Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals on Saturday. Ultimately, Shea Theodore won it for the Golden Knights, and in honor of that, today's list is the top overtime games in the Stanley Cup Finals. And in looking at this, it is remarkable how many overtime games have been played in the Stanley Cup Finals and how many great games there have been. Hard to top a game where one team had a 4-0 lead in the third period. They haven't given up a 4-0 lead in years. And in the Stanley Cup Finals, the other team scores 3 goals in 39 seconds. They score late to tie it and then send it not only into overtime, but into double overtime. And both goalies performed at a really high level, even though it was 4-4. It was a fun game to watch and a tough one to beat. But let's get our list started with number 6, and this is only last year. Brad Marchand, who had been traded after an illustrious long career with the Bruins, is one of the stars for the Florida Panthers. He scored a thrilling double overtime winner to give Florida a win in Game 2 of the 2025 Stanley Cup Finals against Edmonton. Marchand capitalized on a breakaway at the 8:05 mark of the second extra frame. Watch him get the puck and just take off, and bing, bang, boom, gets the goal and beats goalie Stuart Skinner to give the Panthers a 5-4 win and tie the series at 1 apiece. And Marchand and the Panthers would go on to win their second straight Stanley Cup over Edmonton in 6 games. As much as we hate the guy, and he's earned it, he is a really good player, or was a really good player, and obviously comes up in big-time games and at big times, and did that for Edmonton, or for Florida against Edmonton last year. So Brad Marchand, number 1 on our list of the best overtime winners in NHL Stanley Cup Final history. All right, now we have number 5. And it comes from 2013. And another hated team and or player, Andrew Shaw of the Blackhawks. And this game went to triple overtime. Game 1 between the Blackhawks and Brad Marchand's Boston Bruins. Boston built a 3-1 lead early in the third period with goals from Milan Lucic and Patrice Bergeron. The Blackhawks mounted a late rally with 2 goals in roughly 4 minutes to tie the game, forcing OT. It went to overtime, then 2 overtimes, and then in the third overtime, Andrew Shaw scored what stood up as the winner in triple overtime. He scored it at 12:08 of the third OT to give the Blackhawks the 4-3 win over Boston. And what happens when you're in a third overtime? Fluky things. You just go to the net and see what happens, and that's exactly what Shaw did there. Now, interestingly, in this series, this was only Game 1, and let's watch Shaw again. Hey, we always talk about getting our skates in the blue paint, and we're going to talk about that later on here in this segment. But watch Shaw just go to the net, get the stick up, and bing, bang, boom, took a Rask. Can't save it, and the Blackhawks win the game. Now, Boston would rebound to win Game 2 in overtime, then a shutout win in Game 3. So Boston's up 2-1. But the Hawks won the final 3 games and took this series in 6. So Andrew Shaw of the 2013 Blackhawks in triple overtime is our number 5. Number 4, in 1980, the New York Islanders dynasty begins on a goal by Bobby Nystrom. May 24th, 1980 to be exact. Nystrom scored the historic overtime winner in Game 6 against the Philadelphia Flyers. The goal broke a 4-4 tie at the 7-11 mark of OT at the Nassau Coliseum, and it gave the Islanders a 5-4 victory and a 4-2 series win over the Flyers. This legendary moment clinched the first Stanley Cup championship in Islanders franchise history and started a dynasty that went on to win 4 consecutive championships, and Nystrom was a big key, and that was a really good team with Mike Bossy and Clark Gillies and Denny Potvin and Brian Trottier and Billy Smith. They were loaded with Hall of Famers. Bobby Nystrom was a great clutch player, and this team also had Kenny Morrow, who had just come from the U.S. Olympic team. He was the first player to win a gold medal and then win a Stanley Cup. But Bobby Nystrom gave them the victory, so an overtime winner to win the Stanley Cup. Now, I mentioned that it was the Islanders and the Flyers playing for the Stanley Cup Finals. You say, but they're both from the East. This is the way the NHL should do it now in the playoffs, and this is the way they did it then. If you had the best record in the league, you played the team with the 16th best record. Throw the conferences out the window. 2 would play 15, 3 would play 14, and on and on and on. That way, you didn't have a situation where if one conference was dramatically better than the other conference, like this year. You had 3 Central Division teams in Colorado, Dallas, and Minnesota that were all capable of winning the Stanley Cup. Well, all of those teams would have been rewarded for their good seasons under the old format that should be applied these days. Gary Bettman, I know you're watching, and you should be paying attention to this. 1 plays 16, 2 plays 15, and so on. And that's one of the reasons that the Islanders won that first Stanley Cup, and then they wound up winning 4 in a row, thanks to Bobby Nystrom winning that one. All right, number 3, a little Blues flavor here. In 1970, Bobby Orr's iconic flying goal, he actually flew after the goal, was scored on May 10th of 1970. Now think about that. Here we are in early June. The Stanley Cup Finals were in early May in 1970, and the Bruins won it 4-0. Just 40 seconds into OT of Game 4 against the Blues, Orr passed the puck to his teammate Derek Sanderson, who wound up playing for the Blues later in his career, in the corner and raced toward the net. Sanderson slid the puck back out, allowing Orr to knock it past Glenn Hall. Immediately after the shot, Noel Picard tripped Orr, and watch him fly through the air after he scores the game-winning goal here. So he didn't really score the goal while flying. He flew after scoring the goal. Now watch, he's going to put it past Glenn Hall, and then there's the trip, and there is Orr, and that wound up providing us with a classic photo as well. And one of the iconic images in hockey history is Orr flying through the air after his team had won the Stanley Cup. And there's the image of Orr with his arms raised in triumph, captured on camera by Ray Lucier, one of the great photographers of all time. And it's one of the most famous hockey pictures and one of the most recognizable hockey pictures in sports history. So Bobby Orr beating the Blues, I know, was number 3. Number 2, okay, you'll like this one a little bit better. Carl Gunnarsson. Hey, we're Blues fans. We have to put this one near the top, don't we? Gunnarsson scored the game winner, 3:51 into overtime for the Blues in Game 2 of the 2019 Stanley Cup Final. He won it in Boston, and this gave the Blues, remember, their first ever Stanley Cup Finals victory. There's Gunnarsson scoring the winner. That's not who we expected. That wasn't on our bingo card, but Gunnar, there you got another guy in front of the net, and he gets it past Rask, and the Blues come away with a victory. And it was the first Stanley Cup Final game victory for the Blues in the 52-year history of the franchise, and it snapped a 13-game finals losing streak. That's hard to do when you get to the finals, lose 13 in a row. You've got to be pretty good. It was also the only playoff goal of Gunnarsson's 12-season NHL career. Game 2, so memorable for us, and we're closing in on We Went Blues Day, and that was a big part of it. Boom Boom Gunnarsson is our number 2 with his overtime goal in the Stanley Cup Finals. Okay, and another one that has a Blues flavor. Our number 1 Stanley Cup Finals overtime goal of all time And let me go back to Gunnarsson for a second, because we need to mention that it was legendary in hockey folklore because of that exchange during the second intermission with Craig Berube. Now, with under 2 minutes left in the third, Gunnarsson had a shot that clanged off the crossbar. He would have won it in regulation, but during the break, Gunnar ran into Craig Berube at the urinal and told him, "I just need one more shot." Berube laughed it off, but Gunnarsson delivered when he got that one more shot, and that's one of the great videos in history, is Berube laughing hysterically when he told the story. Okay, now our number one ever. It's the 1999 Dallas Stars, and it's 1999 Brett Hull. After leaving the Blues as a free agent, he finally got his first Stanley Cup, and he scored the most famous and controversial overtime goal in Stanley Cup history on June 20th, 1999. And here's why it's controversial. In the rule book then, now we talk about players having their skates in the crease, take away the goalie's eyes. In the rule book then, if a player had his skate in the blue paint, a goal was disallowed. Hull clearly had his skate in the blue paint and scored the goal. Even though we had replay, they awarded it to Hull, and they gave the Dallas Stars their first Stanley Cup championship with a 2-1 victory over the Sabres in Game 6. The triple overtime winner went down in infamy because of that rule, and the goal should have been disallowed. Hull's skate was clearly inside the crease before he put the puck into the net, yet the officials let the goal stand, and Dallas won their first ever Stanley Cup, and something that Brett Hull desperately wanted to achieve here in St. Louis but could not. He achieved under Ken Hitchcock with the Dallas Stars, and Mike Modano got his championship. Hully obviously would go on to Dallas and win another Stanley Cup championship there, but he has the most iconic overtime goal in Stanley Cup Finals history. We might see one better. It's going to be hard to eclipse that with Vegas and the Carolina Hurricanes in this Stanley Cup Finals, but they've played great so far. They played great games so far, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. All right, that is your list, and Brett Hull is number one, and we are thrilled to bring it to you. All right, coming up here in the fight, I've got a daily wager for you, and it's going to be a good one, so stick around. We're going to have that for you next in the fight. All right, I want you to know about St. Luke's because they are acclaimed as one of the best hospitals in America. And if you're one of the best hospitals in America, you're one of the best hospitals in the world. Well, U.S. News and World Report awards St. Luke's with 2025-2026 Best Hospital in 18 categories. St. Luke's was named one of the best hospitals in the state of Missouri and a best regional hospital in the St. Louis metro area. St. Luke's has been named number 3 in the nation by Modern Healthcare's 50 top cardiovascular hospitals, earning one of the highest distinctions for cardiovascular care in the U.S. St. Luke's is also the only hospital in Missouri to receive this prestigious national recognition. Healthgrades named St. Luke's one of the best 50 hospitals for cardiac surgery for 8 years in a row. St. Luke's is among the top 5% of U.S. hospitals in the nation for cardiac surgery and coronary interventional procedures. So with that knowledge, and I can attest to this, when you go to St. Luke's to let them check on your heart, you're not only going to the best hospital in St. Louis, you're going to one of the best hospitals in the world. When I had a cardiac event, I was already a St. Luke's patient. And boy, was I lucky that I landed with a St. Luke's cardiologist, Morton Rinder, and a St. Luke's surgeon and St. Luke's rehab nurses. They did fantastic work for me, and if you have any cardiac issues at all, they'll do great work for you at St. Luke's as well. They are perfect for what we need here in St. Louis. And they put their heart into making sure that yours is healthy. If you have any questions at all about your chest pain and heart, go to St. Luke's, 314-205-6737, or find them on the web at stlukes-stl.com. All right, I did not win for you over the weekend. I had Scotty Scheffler to win. He finished tied for 12th with Rory McIlroy, so I'm a loser. But I'm not stopping. We've got a daily wager for you. And so with the NBA tonight, I was thinking, okay, I got to go NBA, right? And I was thinking, there's no way Victor Wembanyama is going to be held down. But you know what? There's just no value at him. I was thinking 27 points. That was going to be my number. But there's no value with Victor Wembanyama at 27 points at -121. So rather than going with the NBA, I am going to go a little MLB for us. And I am going to go with the Philadelphia Phillies against the Toronto Blue Jays, okay? And there's something that I really like here. I'm going to go to combined player props, and I'm going to slide all the way down to the bottom with home runs, okay? Combined home runs, and I'm going to go with Trey Turner and Kyle Schwarber, but this is Trey Turner or Kyle Schwarber to hit a home run. Combined home runs between Turner and Schwarber, 1. So Schwarber hits the daylights out of the ball. Turner's all right. So they're at +157 to hit a home run. So if Turner or Schwarber hits a home run tonight, we are winners. And so let's put $100 on that and see what we can come up with. If they hit a home run, one of those two hits a home run, we win $257. And that is a pretty good deal. So even though I didn't get you anything over the weekend, I've got one for you tonight at +157 Schwarber. And I know it says Schwarber and Turner, but combined home runs. It's Schwarber or Turner to hit a home run. That's what I'm looking at for Philadelphia against Toronto. That is our daily wager. And coming up here on The Fight, we've got our fun fact of the day. We've got story time with Uncle Randy, and we've got today in sports history. So stick around for that. It's coming your way. All right. Today's fun fact, and you know that I kind of have a level of disdain for NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. And when I first saw that he had declined an invitation to appear at a House Judiciary Committee hearing on June 10th, I thought, man, what an arrogant jerk this guy is. And of course, the House Judiciary Committee is really interested in the league's broadcast and streaming deals because they think that we as fans are paying too much to watch the NFL. According to a letter sent from NFL General Counsel Ted Uliott, though, the committee's chairman, Jim Jordan, read this on Wednesday, that Goodell will not be able to participate, quote, due to ongoing litigation related to the topic of the hearing. Where is the NFL litigation coming from? Well, from the judicial branch of our federal government, of course. The Department of Justice opened an investigation in April into whether the NFL is engaging in anti-competitive tactics and overcharging customers. They are. So the legislative branch wants to find out what's going on with the NFL media rights. But the judicial is already investigating, which gives Goodell a legitimate reason, I know I hate to say this, to not appear before Congress. The other part of the government, the judicial branch, is already investigating. So he doesn't want to, it's kind of like any entity that says we aren't going to comment on something that is in litigation right now, that is in court. So it sounds like from the government perspective, their right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And even though I don't like Roger Goodell, and I would initially think if I saw the headline, he's being a jerk, he has something to hide. No, there's a legitimate reason here. Now, one thing that we should note is that the reason that the congressional people can do this is because in 1961, they gave the NFL what amounts to a free monopoly, because NFL teams can congregate as a group of 32 and negotiate their national TV rights. Rather than having 32 different entities that are negotiating, they're allowed to negotiate as a group. And they were given this antitrust exemption in exchange for putting their games on TV. And there's specific rules about the games being on TV, which in 2026, with a different TV environment than 1961, are completely different. But the House Judiciary Committee believes that they can take a look at it. So Roger Goodell isn't going to be testifying anytime soon. All right, time for story time with Uncle Randy, and we're going to get the wheels spun by director Tyler, and we're going to have a decade from my sports fandom, and then we'll come up with a sport, and I will have a story to tell you. And we've got 90s basketball. Okay, so let's talk a little doesn't this become easy, especially as we close in on Father's Day, because it seemed like every time we got to the finals in the 90s, Michael Jordan was either when his dad was alive celebrating Father's Day or after his dad had passed away. Well, one of my favorite times ever in watching the NBA Finals was in that first run. So they beat the Lakers in the first one, and then I think they beat Seattle in the second one. And Michael, early in that part of his career, wasn't known as a great three-point shooter, but he hits like 7 threes in a row, and like 5 of those were in the first half. And he's coming back down the court, and this would have been the 92 Finals, I believe. Let's see, because they won in 91, 92, 93, missed 94, 95, and then won in 96, 97, 90. So I think it was the 92 Finals where he hits one of these shots and he's running back down the court and he just goes like, I don't know what's happening, but it was pretty incredible. The greatest of all time, Michael Jordan, could beat you by accident. And he did in that finals against Seattle back in 1992. And then in 93, they beat Phoenix, and then he came back and beat Utah a couple of times. He was fun to watch, and that was one of the great moments of Michael's career. It was so it was fantastic. That is Story Time with Uncle Randy here in the fight. And it's time for this date in sports history. And on this date, former Blues head coach Jacques Demers and his Montreal Canadiens won the Stanley Cup. They beat the Kings 4-1 for a 4-1 series win. And it was their 24th Stanley Cup in history. And that's still the last time a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup. There have been 32 consecutive Stanley Cups awarded to non-Canadian teams. Of course, this was the great Patrick Roy winning again. He had also won in 1986. And Jacques Demers, who was such a great coach here for the Blues. And then he went to Detroit and he turned around that program and got them on the trajectory where they wound up winning 3 Stanley Cups. So Jacques winds up back at home in Montreal and winds up winning the Stanley Cup. And there are very few coaches that got players to go better than Jacques Demers did. Not only was he a pretty good technician and understood his strengths and weaknesses as a coach and utilized his staff, but the biggest thing that he had going for him was that he got people motivated. He could motivate a fan base. He could motivate a media. He could motivate a team. And here in St. Louis, even though the team was on a shoestring budget under Harry Ornest, he got players to play their hardest. And one time in 1986, got them to go to the Stanley Cup semifinals. So he was great. By the way, one quick note for Jacques Demers. So we used to do a show at KMOX. It was a Saturday afternoon sports show that started at 5, ran till 7 before Blues hockey. He would come on with us at 6:15, right before a Blues game started at 7:05, to talk about that night's Blues game. He was that sort of a coach and that great of a guy. So congratulations. This is the anniversary for Jacques Demers and the Canadiens to win their 24th Stanley Cup. Kind of a shame that hockey's their national sport up in Canada, and we've gone 32 consecutive finals without a Stanley Cup championship being handed, or a Stanley Cup being handed to a Canadian team. All right, people are loving Cardinals fastball. You've seen the promos today. It's a 1-hour condensed version of the previous day's Cardinal game, and it's every day here on Matrix Midwest. We've got it at noon and 4, and then don't forget we have actual Cardinal baseball coming up this Friday at 7 o'clock as they take on the Minnesota Twins in the Twin Cities. That'll be a lot of fun. And then right after the second showing of fastball at 4, you've got us at 5 o'clock. Tyler and I every single day with the fight, 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. and then re-aired at 7 o'clock the next morning. If you missed us, you can catch us on the Matrix Midwest app, and you can also just Bluetooth us in your car. You don't have to be watching me the whole time. You can just listen. And don't forget, we do play the fight too. You can sign up for that by emailing us at thefight@matrixmidwest.com. For our director, Tyler Klaus, I'm Randy Carricker. Thanks so much for being a part of the show, and we'll see you next time in the fight. So long, everyone.